So then, more recently, I thought, well, let's take this into the retail market. So I did a sketch one day. I'm just, sitting at my desk, side view, this thing, big wheels, drew it in perspective, sort of started to refine the scenario. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? This will be in Palm Springs. It has a carbon footprint of about 6 Hummers. Did a shaded sketch so I could refine the details and the mechanicalness of it and so forth. And then I went out to Palm Springs. I have a friend out there, stood in front of his house, took pictures of the mountains. This is the small preliminary picture. This is about 8 inches from here to here. So you can do these very quick, and you can get all your colors arranged, and you can change your mind very easily. And then you do the big one, and I'll match maybe 12, 13, 14 colors key to each of these areas. So when I paint the big one, I don't have to worry about mixing colors. I can worry about detail and maybe some small changes to the other illustration. So now this is done. This is done for myself. This is a self-entertainment. So now we start the real rendering. Here's a photograph of the mountains just to the west of Palm Springs from the south end of town. So first you take the photograph. Now, the sun was going from the wrong direction, so I reversed it. But here's the line drawing of the mountains. We're starting to insert architectural features here in scale to my composition. I decided to use my friend's front gate as a background element, so just splice it in here, because I'm going to trace all of this on vellum. So now we're ready to paint. And you paint from the background, foreground, because every layer you paint, you're refining edges, and you gradually come forward until you got the whole thing done. So each of these colors has been mixed very carefully to create this effect from sun glare here, coolness on the architecture, and so forth. And as we come forward, we start to finish the painting. Middle ground. So there's the gate. Bougainvillea, I love bougainvillea because you can do this very fast with a brush. It's called scumbling, but it's very fast. Got the reference out of a magazine for foliage, out of a big foliage library. So now we're in the middle ground. Got the wall here. Got some people back here for scale. We start the foreground. And the wheels are the most difficult thing. I learned how to do hand lettering in Art Center, and now somebody would say, why? That's what computers do the best, is to do graphics and iterations of things that you're satisfied with. So the wheels, these wheels took a whole day to do, because each of these tread things has to be hand cut in, lips guide, and hand done very meticulously, because they have to be regular. You can't just do that. I start filling in the details. So I decided to use this rim drive technique, which is current in the experimental motorcycle industry. Finish the base for the body. So this airbrush. What I'm doing is airbrushing the ground tone into the sky without the horizon detail. And that, when you do that, that makes it look shiny. Fill in the glass. This is the entry plate right here. This is just a mechanical, it sticks out to take in air when you're at speed. And the rest of it is just this big, massive thing that looks really cool. Carries 4 people in elaborate mechanical comfort. This was done, well, in the 60s also, for U.S. Steel. And the Tate Gallery in London was featuring an exhibition by this lady designer. And she didn't want any clue on the publicity posters of what her exhibit was about. She wanted to be totally surprise, surprise, surprise. And the notion was, what would happen to London if the Thames overflowed and flooded the city? And that's sort of a, who cares? But Prince Charles would be very upset. So they contacted me, and they used this part of this illustration up to about here on the cover of the catalog for the show. And these posters were all over London, and I have this all scanned in. So I got from them the freeway network around London, and changed all these signs to reflect the routing from London to over to Calais and so forth. Well, to Dover. This was a van. The idea here was you can take metal and perforate it at a very fine texture rate and see through it. So that was the idea. If you have lace curtains in the front of your house, well, you're not that shiny. You can see out, nobody can see in. Same principle. You optically create a mask, which is a confusion of detail, but you can see out, but you can't see in. So these panels are all perforated down here, so you can see out. And again, this was done for the Intersection magazine. So what we're doing is we're just seeing different parts of the transportation environment. And working in the movies, somebody asked me on an interview, they said, well, Mr. Mead, do you prefer to work for real clients, the real world, or movies? And I said, there's no difference. Each one tells a story. Movies are a story taking place in their own time frame defined by the script and the story rationale. So those worlds need all the stuff we have in the real world. They need costume, they need ambiance, they need transportation, they need articles, artifacts, things that people handle, and maybe even a story. You know, that helps. So I said, well, there's no difference. This was done for a rather ill-fated movie. I don't know if you remember Sound of Thunder by Peter Hyams. The movie had horrible, horrible troubles. They shot in Prague, they had a flood, and the jungle scene was built up on above the floor, the studio floor, about 4, 5, 6 feet, because they had to have stuff coming up underneath. Well, the flood almost washed it away. The crew, my friend Richard Holland was the production designer. He was on a 4th or 5th floor apartment. The water came up to the 2nd floor, and of course it was wicking up through the walls, and it was a mess. And the whole crew was ready to quit and just come back to the United States, and Peter Hyams begged them, so they did finish principal photography. And then it went through travail with special effects. They farmed those out all over the world. And it could have been a dynamite movie, but unfortunately, this was the taxi for that film. And in the movies, you don't need all this stuff. This is just tchotchkes. It's kitsch. It's mechanical beyond the point of being even visually logical. We had a one-man show in Palm Springs. I sold this rendering. And when you have one-man show, you tend to do a piece of art for that show. You know, the artist is being honored with this one-man show. So this was, again, a photograph of the mountains just to the west. This is taken from inside the portico of the Palm Springs Conference Center. So these stone pillars architecturally are right on. And it's in the future, and it's an afternoon gala, costume gala. These are our anti-gravity craft arriving. You can see the people inside. This is my friend 61 Lincoln Continental because I just like the car. These people are being parked. And this panel, we're already starting to do that. These are electroluminescent RGB panels that can be programmed, and you'll see more and more of this as the car world becomes more. If you think, you know, spinner hubcaps are outrageous, wait. But I was trying to recapture the entire history of transport from horse-drawn carriage to the future. So these these are the anti-gravity units here. And it does the same exact thing. Big wheels at each end, cab in the middle, it's self-driven. It's, in fact, a coach. Another illustration done for a one-man show in Tokyo called Silver Coach. It's silver. This big ball is the total motive power, steering, suspension, everything. In the background, you see this young man here letting his lady out of the coach. These are announcement masks and communication aerials. And the scenario, I don't have any idea what this is up here. It looks like it's Habitat City hanging on the other side of this rock. I don't know. This goes back in the distance. The reflections, this shiny, it has a sense of place, but the sense of place is total invention, but yet it settles it down into its own story format, and you tend to believe it. These are robot valets. They don't need a dental plan. Now, the interesting thing about vehicle design, sometimes it's violated. My friend Harold did the car for Minority Report. Was that when they had the Lexus? going the wrong way. And, you know, but vehicles generally, you sort of feel this goes this way. That's the back end. And there's no wheels, there's no windows, there's no idea of scale, but you still have a feeling that it's got a sense of direction and a horizontal alignment. I don't like a lot of cars today because they are all jacked up in the rear. They look like they're in a perpetual panic stop from the time they leave the factory. And the idea is not a new one. It started years and years and years ago in the California Roadster market with the big wheels in the back, small wheels in the front. It was called a California rig. Now, this goes way back. I was at Ford Motor Company for 26 months until I got my very fortunate elevator out of the Ford factory environment. But I did these renderings. Now, when I graduated from Art Center in 1959, isn't that happened to us for 50 years? Jesus. But you were paid $4,000 a year. That was a standard salary, and it was also the cost of a brand new Cadillac. So you can figure the Cadillac guys now programmers go to work at $80,000, $85,000, $90,000 a year. So this was one of the renderings I did for the vendors lobby. And it's an anti-gravity vehicle, this nice glass bubble. It's pure fantasy. It's not even terribly mechanical, it's more of a sculpture. Here's some standing on end, but the salesman trying to sell one to those people. Test model being run up here. These people in these outrageous cloaks. That's so I didn't have to render feet, for one thing. Well, I'm just telling you. And she's got her pet with her, this gas-filled, sort of reminds me, maybe that was an executive, I don't know. But it's a whole thing, the graphics down here, the beta coupe. So this is done probably about 1960, when I first worked for Ford. One of my favorite stories of George Walker, who was head of design for Ford, and I was there. In school, there was a series of papers called Canson papers, beautiful papers, sort of texture to them. And my favorite color was this mulberry colored paper. It's really very pretty. You can take Prismacolor and do sky tone and then put highlights with white tempera, and it really makes a nice looking sketch. So I'm working away on a Galaxy or some big Ford sedan sketch in the advanced studio. And Gail Haldeman, who was second in command of the studio, comes over and he said, he says, George doesn't like that color paper. And I was young, and I said, well, George could afford a psychiatrist and tell him why. So even if you go to this extent, we don't know whether it's backwards, forwards, front. It's a thing here. The people give it scale. It's shiny. It has graphics. It looks kind of weird. And it could be some future development that is, in fact, a transport device. So let's go to pure story. Now, here's the story. This is very small. It's only about 7 inches or something from side to side. It was also going to be in the U.S. Steel book, but they said there's no wheels, so we don't want it in the book. I don't know, for Christ's sakes, people. These designers do cars all day long. They like this sort of thing. How am I doing on time? Great. Yeah. So here's the story. The rocket ship has crashed. They've salvaged one of these anti-grav coils from the ship. Fortunately, the chief engineer survived. And Penelope here is out in the sun. She doesn't know that this planet has very bad radiation. She's got really burned. And this planet has no aloe bushes, so she's really hurting. But the detail here, you can see it's been ripped out of something. It doesn't really belong where it is. They've rigged up a canopy for shade, and it's floating across this chasm to maybe a habitat or something over here on the other side of the cliff. So it's a whole complete story in one little tiny rendering, and you could look at this and sort of make up all kinds of rationales for this particular scene. I had a fellow working with me. This is a 72 frame rotation we did for a game for some people in Tokyo, terraforming. And so I designed these vehicles. The scheme of the game was that 6 planets would send their cars to this one sort of vacant planet, and they'd race, and the winner of the race won the war. Instead of killing people, they just running machines in the ground. So this was the sand people's car. They were the bad people. So it's a 72 frame rotation. I did all the sections, classic surface development drafting, and then Nick skinned it and made the 72.